From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
This is Sergeant Bacon. I'm calling for Police Chief Allen.
Oh, yes, Sergeant. Did you get the new tally on the robbery?
No, I didn't know there was a new one.
It stands at 48,000 now.
And murder, too. I guess this one will rip Youngstown to pieces, all right.
Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Columbia All Risk Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Youngstown Credit Group matter. Expense account item 1, $45.60, airfare and incidentals between Hartford and Youngstown, Ohio, where Sergeant Biggin added the following details to what I had already learned.
The Youngstown Credit Group is a savings and loan set up for the employees out at Federal Mills. About 2 years ago, they set up this service to cash the men's paychecks. Enfield and Watson have been going right out to the plant every payday at noon. Charge a small fee for the service.
The same two men every week with that kind of money?
That's right. Then this morning, somebody finally caught up with them. Knew the route they took and the time. Evidently stopped their car some way, got into it, relieved them of the money, and then pushed them out while they were making their getaway. Enfield and Watson are a mess. That's all we've got except an abandoned sedan that might fit in someplace.
It was a couple of hours later when I was told that one of the victims, George Enfield, had died as a result of being thrown from the speeding car. I went to the hospital and there met Chief Edward J. Allen, a man I'd read about and admired as the police officer who had led the fight that finally forced Detroit's Purple Gang out of Youngstown. I was surprised at his being on hand so early in a case and said so.
Because I haven't gotten used to not being a sergeant, I guess. I answer a call with the boys anytime I can. We won't be able to press Watson too far. He'll be in pretty bad shape from the sedatives.
Yeah. Does he know about his partner being dead?
Not yet. And we'd better hold it back. Here.